4 years. 4 years, I stayed until 2 a.m, breaking down the walk-in after she'd already gone home at 11. 4 years I stood in front of her and took the blame for mistakes that weren't mine, because I would rather have swallowed glass than watch her be disappointed. 4 years I wrote the menu that made critics use the word revelation, and I let her name be the one on top of it. My name is Elena Reyes, and I'm going to tell you about the Saturday night the woman I loved untied the apron I'd pressed for her that morning in the middle of the dinner rush, with the tickets still printing behind us like nothing in the world was ending, and held it out to me. I thought she wanted me to hang it up for her. She didn't. She said 5 words to me. 5 words I'll hear in the dark, for the rest of my life. But that wasn't even the worst part of that night, because the worst night of my life was about to become the first night of the rest of it. Let begin. The last thing she ever handed me was her apron. Not a word first. Not a warning. Just Vivienne Laurent reaching behind her neck on a Saturday night in the middle of the dinner rush, untying the strings of the apron I'd pressed for her that morning, and holding it out to me while the tickets kept printing behind us like nothing in the world was ending. I took it. Of course I took it. 4 years of taking things from her hands had trained my body to move before my brain caught up. My fingers closed around the fabric, still warm from her, and I thought, God help me, I thought she wanted me to hang it up for her. She didn't. You have to understand what that kitchen was. On a Saturday, at 8:40 at night, it was a living thing. 6 burners roaring, the flat top hissing under a fillet of turbot, the pass stacked 3 tickets deep, someone calling behind, hot behind every 10 seconds. The smell of brown butter and thyme, and scorched sugar hanging so thick you could have spread it on toast. That was my world. I built that world. I wrote the menu that made critics use the word revelation. I trained the line cooks. I stayed until 2 a.m, breaking down the walk-in. When Vivienne went home at 11. When a plate went out wrong, I was the one who stood in front of her and said it was my fault, even when it wasn't, because I would rather have swallowed glass than watch her be disappointed. I loved her. There. I've said it faster than I ever said it to her. 4 years, and I never once said it to her. So, when she pulled me by the elbow into the little alcove by the dry storage, out of the noise, and I felt her hand on my arm, some stupid animal part of me lit up. After 4 years of nothing but almost a look held a second too long, her thumb brushing mine when I passed her a spoon, the night she fell asleep on my shoulder in the office, and I didn't breathe for an hour, so I wouldn't wake her, after all of that, I thought. Maybe tonight is the night the almost becomes something. Then I saw Brooke standing behind her, Brooke Callahan, 200,000 followers, and a smile like a knife wrapped in ribbon. She'd been consulting for 3 weeks, filming the plating, doing little videos where she called the kitchen her home. I'd trained her the way I trained everyone, patient, because that's who I am, and she'd smiled at me the whole time, and I never once saw it coming. Vivienne looked at me. Her face was very calm. That was the thing about her, the calmer she got, the more it meant, and she said the 5 words that I will hear in the dark for the rest of my life. Elena, you can go now. That was it. That was all of it. I remember the sound the fryer made. I remember Marcus wasn't there that night. He'd left the restaurant 2 years before, and I remember thinking, absurdly, that I wished he was, so someone would look at me. Because no one was looking at me. 12 people I had fed and covered for and taught, and every one of them found something urgent to do with their hands. I don't. My voice came out wrong. Too high. Vivienne, we're in the middle of service. We're slammed. I can't just... Brooke's got it, she said. And Brooke reached out and took the apron from my hands, the one Vivienne had just given me. She slipped it over her own head and tied it at the small of her back and said, "Thanks, hun," in that sweet voice, and I watched my own life get worn by somebody else. I should have screamed. I've imagined screaming 1,000 times since. Throwing a pan, something. But you don't, when it's really happening. You just stand there, and your ears ring, and the room goes very small and very far away at the same time. I looked at Vivienne. I made myself look at her, because I needed to see it in her face, whatever it was, and I asked her the only question that mattered. The one I'm ashamed of, still, because of how much it begged. Was any of it real? I said, the last 4 years. Any of it? She didn't answer. That's the part people don't believe when I tell it. They think there must have been a speech, a cruelty, at least, something I could hold on to and hate. But there was nothing. She just held my eyes for 1 second, where I swear something moved behind hers, something that looked almost like grief, and then she looked away, at the tickets, at the pass, at anything that wasn't me. Silence. In a kitchen that never went silent, there was silence. I untied my own apron. My hands were steady, which surprised me. I folded it once, in half, the way I'd folded 1,000 towels, and I set it on the steel counter next to the salt. I didn't hang it up. I don't know why that mattered to me, but it did. I set it down, and I walked out through the middle of that kitchen, past the line, past the boy on guard manger, who I'd hired myself and who couldn't meet my eyes, past the pass, out the swinging door into the dining room, where couples were laughing over wine and had no idea, and out the front, into the November air. The cold hit me like a hand. I got to my car. I got the door open. I got myself into the seat, and I put my hands on the wheel at 10 and 2, like my father taught me, and I stared through the windshield at the brick wall of the parking lot. And then, only then, alone, with the doors locked, and no one left to be strong, for I let myself cry. Not pretty crying. The other kind. The kind that comes up from somewhere under your ribs and folds you over the steering wheel and doesn't ask permission. I cried for the 4 years. I cried for the apron. I cried because I was 34 years old, and I had given a woman everything I had, quietly, the way you salt a stock invisibly, so no one ever tastes the labor, and she had said 5 words, and handed me to the door. The heater ticked, the windows fogged. Somewhere behind that brick wall, dinner service went on without me, and I sat there in the dark, and I had no idea none that the worst night of my life was about to become the first night of the rest of it. For 3 days, I became a person my grandmother would not have recognized. Elena Reyes raised me to believe that a body needs 3 things every morning: water, light, and something warm in the stomach, and I violated all 3. I didn't open the curtains. I didn't shower. I ate dry cereal out of the box with my hand, sitting on the couch in the same t-shirt I'd worn out of that kitchen, watching television so stupid it made a sound in my head like static. Shows about people renovating houses. Shows about people finding love on islands. Anything with other people's voices in it, so my apartment wouldn't be silent, because silence was where the 5 words lived. Elena, you can go now. I'd hear them in the shower I wasn't taking. I'd hear them between the game shows. I'd hear them in the space right before sleep, which was the worst, because sleep was the only place she still touched my thumb with hers. Here's a thing about grief you don't learn until you're in it. The body keeps trying to work. Twice, I woke at 4 a.m. Heart going. Already halfway to standing, because some old animal part of me thought I had a walk-in to break down, a stock to skim, a woman to get to before she got there alone. And then, I'd remember, and I'd lie back down on the cushions that smelt like me now, only me, and stare at the ceiling. On the 3rd morning I made the mistake. I don't know why I picked up the phone, maybe some bruise wants pressing. I opened Instagram, the app I'd used for 4 years to promote a restaurant that was no longer mine, and there she was at the top. Not Vivienne, Brooke, a photo in my kitchen. My station, the good light that comes through the west window at 4 in the afternoon, the light I used to plate in, because it made everything look like it mattered. And Brooke, standing there, holding a spoon the way I taught her to hold it and wearing the apron. Vivienne's apron. The one from that night. The caption said, "Some kitchens just needed a fresh pair of hands, grateful for new beginnings." I read it 4 times. Fresh pair of hands. I looked at my hands. There was a burn scar across the base of my left thumb from a sheet pan in 2019, the year I worked a double on Christmas, so a cook with a new baby could go home. There was a nick on my right forefinger that never healed straight. These were not fresh hands. These were the hands that built the thing she was standing in. I threw the phone. I threw it. Across the room, into the armchair, hard enough that it bounced off and hit the wall, and I heard the little crack of the screen, and I did not care. I put my face in my not fresh hands, and I made a sound. I'm glad no one heard. And that is exactly when someone kicked my front door. Not knocked. Kicked. Because his hands were full. Raise. Kick. I know you're in there. I can smell the sadness from the hallway. Kick. Open the door, or I'm eating both of these myself, and I will not feel bad about it. I got up. I don't know how, but the body works. I opened the door, And there was Marcus Webb, my oldest friend, the only person from culinary school I still talk to, holding a pizza box in one hand and a six-pack under his arm, and wearing the black shirt from the bar he manages now. And he took one look at me, the t-shirt, the hair, the 3 days of it, and his face did something complicated. He didn't say, "Oh, Elena," he knew better. Marcus has never once tried to fix me with a soft voice. It's why I keep him. "Wow," he said instead. "You look like a raccoon that got some bad news." A laugh came out of me. It was mostly a sob wearing a laughs coat, but it counted. He came in. He did not comment on the smell, or the cereal box, or the phone lying face down on the floor. He set the pizza on the coffee table, opened it, opened 2 beers with the lighter he keeps for exactly this reason, put one in my hand, and sat down next to me on the couch of my disgrace like it was the most natural place in the world to be. "Eat," he said. "Then we talk. In that order. I'm not doing feelings on an empty stomach." So I ate. First warm thing in 3 days, and I hated how good it was. Hated that my body betrayed me by being grateful. He let me get 2 slices down before he leaned back and looked at me sideways. "You want me to say I told you so?" he said. "About her?" "No." "Good, because I'm not going to." "Well, I told you so." He held up a hand before I could throw a crust at him. "Once. One time. I've earned one. 2 years ago, the night I quit that place, I told you, Elena, don't fall for a woman who signs your paychecks, because the day it goes bad, she holds all the knives. And you said." "I said it wasn't like that." "You said it wasn't like that." He nodded slowly. "How's it like now?" I looked into the neck of the beer bottle. She handed me her apron, in the middle of service, and then she gave it to Brooke. I heard my own voice go thin. "She didn't even fire me at the end of the night, Marcus. She did it during the rush, like I was a pan she was done with." He was quiet a second, then, gentler than I expected. "That's not about you being disposable. That's about her being a coward who couldn't stand to look at what she was doing for 1 more hour." He shrugged. "Doesn't make it hurt less, just for the record." I didn't answer. Outside, a bus went by. The light through the closed curtains was going amber, 4 o'clock, the plating light, and I felt it in my chest like a bruise. "So here's my actual reason for coming," Marcus said, and he sat forward, elbows on his knees, and I knew from the shift in him that this was the thing. "You're the best cook I've ever stood next to." I'm not being nice. I've worked with people who won awards, and you're better than all of them, and you've spent your entire life making other people's names sound good, Laurent's name. That woman's whole reputation is a coat she's wearing that you sewed. He looked at me. "Open your own place, Elena. Do it for you." I mean it. And something in me went cold and small and shut like a door, because I'd heard those words before, in my own house, a long time ago. My father, at the kitchen table, spreading a lease across the wood, like it was a treasure map. His own place. Finally, his own place. And I remembered the year after, the boxes, the auction sign, the particular grey colour my mother's face turned. I remembered being 9 and understanding, for the first time, that wanting something for yourself was a way of handing life a stick to beat you with. "No," I said. "Elena." "No, Marcus. You know what happened to my dad. People like us don't get our own name over the door. We keep the ship running so someone else can be the captain and take the applause. That's the deal. That's what I'm good at." He looked at me for a long moment, and he didn't argue, which was worse than arguing. "You've cooked for everybody your whole life," he said quietly. "Your dad, that woman, every stranger who ever sat in her dining room. When's the last time you cooked something, just because you wanted to eat it?" And I opened my mouth to answer him, and I couldn't. I sat there on that couch, 34 years old, 3 days unwashed, and I genuinely could not remember the last time I had made a single thing in this world for no other reason than that I, Elena Reyes, was hungry for it. Marcus saw it land. He didn't push. He just handed me another slice and turned on one of the stupid island shows and let me sit with it. But the door in me had opened a crack, and through it, cold and quiet, came a question I didn't have an answer to. It came on a Tuesday, in the ordinary mail, tucked between a gas bill and a supermarket flyer, and I almost threw it away. A plain white envelope. No return address. My name on the front in blue ink. In handwriting I would have known blind. In the dark, from across a lifetime, the slow, careful cursive of a woman who left school at 11 and was prouder of her penmanship than of anything else she owned. The little curl on the E, the way she crossed her T's low, like she was underlining them. Rosa Reyes, my grandmother, who had been dead for 6 months. I sat down on the floor of my hallway. Just sat down, right there, with the gas bill still in my other hand, because my legs made the decision for me. I turned the envelope over. It was sealed. It had waited somewhere for half a year to reach me, and I would find out later how a lawyer, a drawer, an instruction she'd left with the parish that took this long to work its way through the slow machinery of small-town kindness, but in that moment I knew none of it. I only knew her handwriting was in my hands, and her hands were in the ground. I opened it so carefully. I have opened oysters with less care. I did not want to tear a single letter of her. The date at the top was from 1.5 years ago, 2 months before she died. Back when I still thought I had time. Back when I drove out to see her every second Sunday and she'd pretend she wasn't tired, and I'd pretend I didn't see her getting smaller. Mija, it began. And I had to stop and breathe, because that word Mija, my girl in her voice, off the page, undid something. If you are reading this, she wrote, then I am gone. And I am sorry I could not tell you these things with my mouth. I was always braver with a pen. You get that from me. I want to tell you about the woman. I sat up straighter on the cold floor. You brought her to my birthday. The chef, Vivian. You thought I did not notice how you watched her, Mija. I have watched you your whole life. I noticed you before you noticed yourself. I shook her hand, and I looked in her eyes, and I will tell you what I saw, because you are too kind to see it, and someone in this family has to be the mean one. I saw a woman who would use you up like a good knife, and then set you down when you got dull, and never once think she had done wrong. Some people are cold in the way a stove is cold before you light it. They can warm if someone lights them. And some people are cold, like a stone at the bottom of a river, and you can hold that stone against your chest your whole life, and it will only ever take your heat, and give you back nothing, because that is its nature. I could not tell which one she was. But I saw that you had already decided to hold the stone, and I was afraid for you. My hands were shaking now, because she was right. She had been right for 1.5 years, from beyond, and she had known before I did how it would end. So I have done a thing, she wrote, and I hope you will forgive an old woman for meddling from the grave. You know Rosa's table. The little bistro on Delancey, in the old neighborhood, where your grandfather and I fed the factory men their lunch for 30 years. I never sold it. Everyone told me to sell it. I did not. Some part of me was keeping it for something, and I did not know what, until I met your chef and understood. It is yours now, Mija. The lease, the building, the ovens old, but they were good ovens. They only need someone who loves them. It is all in your name. My lawyer, Mr. Ferreira, will find you. And there is one more thing. Look in the box. I looked up. There was no box in my hallway. But the lawyer Ferreira, when I called him the next morning, red-eyed, he said, "Ah, yes, and there's a parcel." She was very specific, and 2 days later it came, and inside it, wrapped in a dish towel I recognized, was her recipe book. Her recipe book, the one that lived on the shelf above her stove my entire childhood, splattered and swollen with steam, held together at the spine with tape she'd replaced 12 times. 50 years of her handwriting. Every dish that ever came out of that woman's kitchen, in that blue ink, with notes in the margins more salt than you think. Wait for the butter to sing. This one is for a sad day. I sat at my own table, and I turned the pages one at a time, and I heard her in every one. The caldo she made when I had the flu, the bread she pulled apart with her hands, the rice that no one, has ever gotten right since, and now I knew why there was an ingredient she'd never told me, written there, plain as anything, a secret she'd kept in ink, so I'd have it after she couldn't say it. And I got to the last page. The last recipe in the book was one I had never seen, never eaten, never heard her name. It had a title, in her careful hand, and the title was my name, Elena. Underneath, a note. I made this one the year you were born and never cooked it for anyone, because it was only ever for you, for the day you were finally hungry for yourself. You will know when that day comes. You always were slow to feel you were allowed things, Mija. That was the one thing I could not teach you, so I wrote it down, and I waited. And the last line of the letter, which I had folded back into the envelope, which I now unfolded again with a hand I could not keep still, said this: "You've spent your whole life cooking to fill other people up. Now, Mija, one time, before I make you cook for yourself." I put the book down. I put my head down next to it, on the table, in the quiet of my apartment, and I did not sob the way I had sobbed in the car. This was different. This came slower and warmer, and it did not fold me over. It held me up. It was the crying you do when someone reaches back through a closed door to put their hand on your face and tell you they never once let go of you, even after they were gone. Especially after. I don't know how long I stayed like that. When I finally lifted my head, the light had changed in the room. It was evening. My grandmother's handwriting was still there, patient, not going anywhere. Her recipe book was open under my hands to a page with my own name on it. And for the first time in 11 days, for the first time, if I am honest, in years I had a reason to wake up in the morning. I closed the book gently, the way you'd close a door on a sleeping child. And I sat in the quiet, and I let it be quiet, and I did not reach for the phone or the television or the noise. I just held it. The key was the old kind, long and heavy, black iron with a barrel end, the kind that doesn't fit anything made after 1970. Mr. Ferreira handed it to me in a manila envelope, and it weighed more than a key should, like it knew what it was holding shut. The bistro was on Delancey, in the old neighborhood, the one the city forgot on purpose, the streets where the factories used to be, where the men my grandmother fed had gone grey, and then gone, where now there were laundromats and a check-cashing place, and one stubborn Portuguese bakery that had outlasted everything. I stood on the sidewalk in front of Rosa's table for a full minute before I could make my hand turn the key. The sign over the door was hand-painted, the paint gone chalky, but you could still read it. Rosa's table, and underneath, smaller, in my grandfather's lettering, because he'd done it himself the week they opened, "Come hungry." The lock fought me, then it gave. The smell hit first, that's always how I know a place, before my eyes do. Dust, and old wood, and underneath it, faint but there, 50 years of garlic and coffee and frying oil soaked so deep into the brick that no amount of closed-up time could lift it out. It smelled like her house. It smelled like being 9 years old. I stood in the doorway, and breathed it in like a person coming up out of water. It was a wreck, I'll be honest. The ceiling had a water stain shaped like a country nobody's named. Half the chairs leaned. The vinyl booths were cracked and taped, the tape gone yellow. Dust lay over everything, thick and soft as snowfall, and when I walked in, my footsteps left a trail across the floor like I was the first person to visit a tomb. But on the walls, on the walls, photographs, dozens of them, in mismatched frames, going grey behind the glass. My grandmother, young, impossibly young, with her hair in a scarf and her sleeves pushed up, laughing at something outside the frame. My grandfather, with a cigarette behind his ear, one arm around a cook, one arm around a stranger, everyone's arm around everyone. The factory men at the counter, caps on, plates full. A whole neighborhood that no longer existed, kept alive in a room nobody had entered in years. I found the light switch. Half the bulbs were dead, but the ones that lived came on with a hum, and the place came halfway out of the dark, and I laughed one surprised sound because it was awful, and it was beautiful, and it was mine. Marcus came by that evening, after his shift. He walked the length of it slowly, the way you walk through a house you're deciding about, running his hand along the counter, testing a chair with his foot until it wobbled. "So," he said finally, "it's a fixer-upper." Marcus. I'm just saying, structurally, is the word I'd use. He pushed open the door to the kitchen and let out a low whistle. "Okay, now this is not a fixer-upper. This is a museum." "Is that a garland?" "That's a garland from before I was born." He touched the old range like a man touching a sleeping animal. "These are good bones, Elena. These are stupidly good bones. The ovens still work." Ferreira had a guy check the gas. I ran my thumb along the edge of the steel prep table, and it came away grey, and I looked at the dust on my thumb, and felt something I hadn't felt in a long time. "I'm going to bring it back. N." He looked at me across the dead kitchen. He didn't make a joke. "Yeah," he said. "I know you are. Debut face. I could see it on your face the second I walked in. I spent the next day going through the records Ferreira had boxed up. It was not good news. The place had been dying for years before it closed a handful of regulars, all of them old, the kind of loyal that shows up twice a month and orders the soup and stays 2 hours. There was almost no money coming in, and there had been almost none for a decade. My grandmother had kept it open, I realized, the way you keep a lamp on for someone who's never coming home. It didn't make sense on paper. It was never supposed to make sense on paper. And here is the thing I had to sit with, alone, at one of those wobbling tables, with a cold cup of coffee and the ledgers open in front of me. I was not going to save this place by being clever. There was no business plan that turned a dying neighborhood bistro into a going concern. If I did this, I did it with my hands and my grandmother's book and nothing else, and it would probably fail, the way my father failed, the way the odds said it would fail. I almost stopped there. I want to be honest about that. I sat at that table with the numbers, and I heard my father's voice, and I felt the old cold door start to swing shut. And then I got up, and I went into the kitchen, and I lit the stove. I don't know why. My hands did it before I decided. I found a pot in the cabinet, washed 50 years of dust off it, and I opened her book to the last page, to the recipe with my name at the top, the one she'd made the year I was born and never cooked for anyone. And I read it through, twice, the way I'd read a letter from someone I missed. It was simple. It was almost embarrassingly simple, a braise, a few humble things, the kind of food that has no ambition, except to be eaten by someone the cook loves. More salt than you think, said her note in the margin. Wait for the butter to sing. And at the bottom, in the smaller hand she used for the things that mattered most. Don't rush the sad part, mija. The long, slow cooking is where the sweetness comes from. Same as people. I cooked it. I cooked it alone, in her kitchen, in the failing evening light, with the old range hissing, and the smell of it filling the room. Filling all 50 years of that room. And something happened to me that I was not ready for. Because I hadn't cooked for myself in so long, that I'd forgotten what it did, and now here I was making the one dish in the world that had been made only ever for me, by a woman who'd loved me before I could speak, and had waited 18 months in the ground for me to finally be hungry enough to make it. I tasted it off the wooden spoon. And I stood there in my grandmother's kitchen and I cried into the pot, quietly, the tears just falling, salting it more than she'd ever have allowed. And I laughed at the same time because I could hear her saying not that much salt. Elena, my God. And it was the best thing I had ever tasted, and I understood, finally, standing there, this was not about Vivian. It had never been about Vivian. It was not about getting even, or proving anything, or winning back a woman who let go of my hand. It was about a girl who had spent 34 years believing she wasn't allowed to want anything for herself, and a grandmother who died still trying to teach her that she was. I turned off the stove. I sat down at the pass, alone, with the bowl in front of me, and I ate the whole thing slowly, in the quiet, in the light of the one working bulb, surrounded by the photographs of everyone who'd ever loved this room. Come hungry, the sign said. For the first time in my life, I had,